So imagine for a second that you're holding a stopwatch.
Okay, a stopwatch.
Right. And you click the button, and the second hand starts sweeping around the dial. You know, tick, tick, tick.
Yeah, you can almost hear it.
Exactly. Now imagine that every single sweep of that hand represents a calculated, really high-stakes military strike. And here's the kicker. You have exactly 48 hours on that stopwatch.
Just 48 hours.
Yep. And when the timer hits 0, the window closes, like perhaps permanently closes. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
Before we start the clock on our analysis today, you should know we are looking at some incredibly charged, raw intelligence. This was recently published on the KULT Patreon page.
Which is a fascinating source, by the way.
It really is. And it's detailing this sudden, massive, and highly volatile shift in the Middle East. We're talking about the United States, Israel, and Iran.
Huge players.
Exactly. And I need to say this right up front. We aren't here to pick a side, right? We're not endorsing a policy or pushing some political viewpoint.
No, definitely not.
Our sole mission today is just to examine the bare mechanics of this reporting, to really try and understand this central, honestly, somewhat terrifying paradox. Like, why is the mere rumor of a potential peace agreement actually triggering a massive 48-hour blitz of airstrikes?
It sounds completely backwards, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, let's unpack this. We need to start with the midnight order.
Right, which is the exact moment this 48-hour clock, actually began dictating every single military and diplomatic move in the region.
Yeah. So you see this playing out in the I-24 news reporting, and they're citing New York Times intelligence about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah.
He gave this very specific, really frantic order to his military commanders on a Tuesday night. And the directive was straightforward, but just colossal.
Just massive in scale.
Right. The order was to destroy as much of Iran's weapons manufacturing capacity as possible within 48 hours.
And the catalyst for this sudden rush, it wasn't even a new threat from Iran.
Yeah. No. It was fear within the Israeli government that U.S. President Donald Trump was about to announce ceasefire negotiations.
What's fascinating here is the sheer velocity of that paradox. Usually we think of peace negotiations as like a cooling off period.
Right, like everybody takes a breath.
Exactly. Yeah. Diplomats start talking, the generals start packing up their gear. But in modern geopolitical conflicts, the impending arrival of a diplomatic settlement often acts as an accelerant.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It creates this frantic drive to establish what military strategists call facts on the ground.
Meaning, like, if you destroy a missile factory today, it doesn't matter what the peace treaty mandates tomorrow, because the factory is already a crater.
Precisely. If a ceasefire freezes the conflict exactly where it stands, well, then both sides are heavily incentivized to grab as much territory, or in this specific case, completely dismantle as much enemy infrastructure as physically possible before that freeze takes effect.
That makes a terrifying amount of sense. And Israel actually had eyes on the proposed terms, right?
They did.
Because the intelligence indicates they received a copy of a 15-point U.S. peace proposal. And since the U.S. and Iran don't exactly have a direct hotline for this kind of thing.
Right, no red phone on the deck.
Exactly. Yeah. So this proposal was being conveyed to Tehran through Pakistani intermediaries.
Yeah, the U.S. relies a lot on back channels.
Yeah.
Pakistan shares a border with Iran and maintains these really complex but functional diplomatic ties with Washington and Tehran.
Making them the designated messengers.
Exactly.
So Netanyahu gets wind of this 15-point plan moving through Pakistan, and immediately he's receiving emergency briefings from the commanders of the Israeli Air Force and the Directorate of Intelligence.
They're literally looking at the map.
Figuring out exactly what remaining targets can still be hit before the music stops.
Right.
It's almost like trying to finish a massive demolition project right before the building inspector arrives to shut down the site, except the inspector here is a potential ceasefire announced by the U.S.
That's a great way to put it. Or it's like two chess players realizing the tournament timer is about to go off in 10 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of planning 3 strategic moves ahead, they just start furiously sweeping each other's pieces off the board, just to see who has more plastic left when the buzzer sounds.
That is exactly what it feels like.
And that is the exact shift in doctrine we are seeing. Netanyahu's order to the Air Force and the intelligence guys is basically a massive triage operation.
Right.
When they are briefing the prime minister on the remaining targets that are still viable, they are abandoning the methodical, long-term campaign. They are looking for maximum strategic degradation in a severely compressed time frame.
But, I mean, hitting those high-value targets requires time, logistics, sustained pressure.
A ton of all three, yeah.
Which means we cannot truly grasp the sheer scale of this 48-hour sprint without zooming out, looking at the baseline of the conflict. We have to look at what Israel is actually trying to finish.
Yes, because the baseline of this specific war is already historically devastating, and that's even before the stopwatch started ticking.
Yeah, let's talk about that. This current war is in its 26th day. It kicked off on February 28th.
Right.
And it began with an absolute tectonic shift-joint U.S.-Israeli airstrikes that resulted in the death of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
Which alone alters the entire geopolitical landscape forever.
Completely. But the sheer volume of the physical conflict since that day is really what we need to focus on. The Israeli military stated they have dropped more than 15,000 bombs on Iran since the war began.
15,000 munitions in less than a month.
It's hard to even picture that.
To put that into perspective, the logistical tail required for that is immense. That means continuous, round-the-clock sorties.
Just cleans constantly in the air.
Exactly. It means mid-air refueling, constant satellite target acquisition, and an incredible burn rate of precision-guided munitions.
Yeah. Let's contextualize that even further for the listener. There was a 12-day conflict with Iran last June. In this current 26-day war, Israel has deployed 4 times the amount of munitions used during that entire June conflict.
4 times they know.
Yeah. They are launching these large-scale attacks on government infrastructure in Tehran, hitting weapons production, storage sites, military bases.
And the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps facilities, right?
Yeah, the IRGC Air Force facilities in Tehran. And we have to look at the why behind that bombardment. The Patreon source explicitly lays out Israel's 3 fundamental war goals.
Right, the big 3.
Number 1, eliminate the threat of Iranian ballistic missiles. Number 2, ensure Tehran cannot develop nuclear weapons. And number 3, create the conditions for the Iranian people to overthrow their government.
Okay, let's just pause on that. Those are absolute maximalist objectives.
Totally. Total nuclear disarmament, complete elimination of a ballistic missile threat, and regime change. If those are the goals, is it even mathematically possible to wrap that up in a 48-hour sprint?
I mean, when we talk about stopping nuclear development, we aren't talking about bombing a single warehouse.
Exactly.
Right?
Not at all.
Not at all. And that is exactly why the math doesn't work. When a state talks about dismantling a nuclear program, they're dealing with uranium enrichment facilities that are often very deep inside mountains.
Places like Natanz or Fordo.
Yes. A 48-hour air campaign cannot vaporize a mountain.
Right.
You might hit the ventilation systems, the surface-level power grids, or the supply chains feeding the centrifuges, but you cannot guarantee total permanent destruction of the program in 2 days.
And I imagine the same goes for ballistic missiles.
Exactly. The supply chains are totally decentralized.
So when the Air Force and intelligence directors are briefing Netanyahu on what is quote-unquote left to hit, they are openly acknowledging that they are going to fall short of those 3 massive goals.
Exactly. The chasm between what Israel fundamentally wants to achieve, like ensuring the conditions for a government overthrow and the reality of a rapidly closing diplomatic window, is driving this extreme escalation.
It's a race.
They are racing the clock, knowing they might have to settle for a partial victory. But they're trying to cause generational setbacks to Iran's military-industrial complex before the whistle blows.
That paints a very clear picture of the Israeli perspective. It's this frantic physical race to dismantle as much infrastructure as possible before a ceasefire is forced upon them.
Yeah.
But while Israel is racing against this U.S. proposed ceasefire, time is exactly what Iran is trying to manipulate.
Right. They have a totally different strategy.
The bombs are dropping, but parallel to that, this massive diplomatic deadlock is playing out.
And the mechanics of negotiation under this level of fire are completely counterintuitive.
Let's look at the Iranian response to the Trump administration's 15-point ceasefire proposal. They rejected it on Wednesday.
Flat out rejected it.
An Iranian military spokesman completely dismissed the U.S. diplomatic efforts, according to the Associated Press. But they didn't just walk away from the table. The IRGC issued their own list of counterdemands.
And these demands are heavy.
Yeah, they demanded the closure of U.S. bases in the Gulf, financial reparations, and permission to maintain their missile program.
Okay, if you are listening to this right now and wondering why any nation would demand financial reparations and the closure of foreign military bases while they are actively absorbing 15,000 bombs,
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
you really have to understand the psychology of diplomatic stall.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because on the surface, there is a massive cognitive dissonance here.
Huge.
A U.S. official quoted in the Wall Street Journal called Iran's demands ridiculous and unrealistic.
Well, yeah.
Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt issued a stark warning. She stated that President Trump is not bluffing and he is prepared to unleash hell if Iran refuses to negotiate.
Unleash hell. That's strong wording.
Right. The U.S. is proposing peace while threatening to unleash hell, and Iran is demanding reparations while their infrastructure is being dismantled. Yet, amidst all this extreme posturing, mediators from Egypt and Pakistan are actively pushing for face-to-face talks between Iranian and U.S. reps.
As early as Friday, right?
Yes, as early as Friday in Pakistan, via Al Jazeera reporting.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we are witnessing is the extreme weaponization of rhetoric.
Oh, absolutely.
Diplomacy in a hot war is rarely just two sides coming together in good faith to find a middle ground. When Iran issues counter-demands that they absolutely know are non-starters.
Like asking for reparations?
Right. They aren't expecting the U.S. to suddenly pack up its Gulf bases and write a check.
No, they are anchoring the negotiation.
Precisely. By issuing exorbitant demands, Iran controls the pace of the diplomatic deadlock. They buy time.
And time is everything here.
Exactly. They anchor the negotiations so far in their favor that if they eventually just agree to a basic ceasefire, it looks like a massive compromise on their part.
That is so strategic.
Furthermore, they are preparing their posture for those potential face-to-face talks on Friday. They want to walk into that room in Pakistan projecting unwavering strength, not desperation, regardless of how much infrastructure is currently burning back home.
And the U.S. response, threatening to unleash hell, that's just the mirror image of that tactic.
Yes. When the White House threatens to unleash hell, it is the diplomatic equivalent of slamming a fist on the table.
Right.
It's a calculated attempt to shatter Iran's stalling tactics and force them to the table by promising a level of escalation that surpasses even the current historic baseline of violence.
So both sides are using the threat of future absolute destruction to leverage the current ongoing negotiations.
Exactly.
But while these two sides are playing this high-stakes psychological poker game with rhetoric, the physical violence is continuing unabated.
Hasn't stopped for a second.
No. Diplomacy is moving at an absolute crawl, stalling for Friday's potential meetings, while the military offensives are moving at lightning speed, which forces us to look at the actual reality on the ground for the people caught between these two flocks.
The human cost is staggering. And honestly, it often gets buried underneath the strategic analysis of bomb payloads and 15-point plans.
It does. When you look at the raw numbers Euronews pulled, the grim reality is unavoidable. This war has already claimed the lives of more than 1,500 people in Iran, more than 1,000 people in Lebanon, 15 civilians in Israel, and 13 U.S. service members.
Just devastating.
And it is vital to note that the attacks are entirely reciprocal. It's not just Israel bombing Iran. Iran continues to fire ballistic missiles at Israel daily.
Right, people forget that part.
We are talking about more than 350 ballistic missiles launched since the start of these hostilities.
And a ballistic missile barrage is a terrifying reality. These aren't like small, localized rockets.
No, not at all.
These are heavy munitions re-entering the atmosphere over heavily populated areas. It requires advanced, constant air defense interceptions.
And amidst this mounting death toll and the daily missile interceptions, we see this incredible public contradiction from Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Oh, this part is really telling.
Last week, in a press conference, he confidently asserted that Iran would no longer be able to enrich uranium or manufacture ballistic missiles. And he predicted that the war would end much faster than people think.
Okay, faster than people think.
Right. But out of the other side of his mouth, he vows to continue the campaign for as long as it takes, until all objectives are met.
That contradiction perfectly encapsulates the dual realities we've been tracking today.
So what does this all mean? Like, for the listener trying to make sense of this, watching casualty numbers rise, knowing 350 ballistic missiles have flown, and hearing Netanyahu say, "This will be over fast, but we'll fight forever."
Right, how does that work?
How do those two thoughts exist in the same unified military strategy?
And to understand that, you have to look at the collision of the two completely different timelines we've been discussing. the diplomatic clock and the military clock.
Okay, break that down.
When Netanyahu says the war will end much faster than people think, he is listening to the ticking of the diplomatic clock. He hears the footsteps of the international community. He sees the 15-point peace plans moving through Pakistani back channels.
Right, he knows the timer is running out.
Yes. He knows the geopolitical tolerance for a prolonged, bloody conflict involving the U.S. and Iran is incredibly short. His window is closing.
Which triggers the 48-hour smash-and-grab offensive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when he says he will fight for as long as it takes, he is speaking directly to the military clock and the existential fears of the state.
How so?
Well, he is acknowledging that a partially destroyed nuclear facility or a damaged missile supply chain is just a temporary setback for an adversary. Look at the quote the source pulls from Fox News from retired General Jack Keane.
Yeah, that was a crazy quote.
He warned, if we reach a ceasefire, we will be playing right into their hands.
That is a very revealing quote from a military planner. The idea that stopping the war is somehow a strategic trap.
Because from a strictly tactical, boots-on-the-ground perspective, a premature ceasefire isn't a victory, it's just a pause button.
It gives an adversary time.
The exact thing they need most. Time to pull their assets out of the rubble, rebuild their weapons manufacturing, repair the centrifuges inside those mountains.
Restock the silos.
Exactly. Restock their missile silos and prepare for the next round of conflict. That deep existential fear of allowing an adversary to regenerate is exactly what fuels Netanyahu's race against the diplomatic clock.
Wow.
He's trying to force the military clock to move fast enough to beat the diplomatic one, permanently crippling the infrastructure before the diplomats force him to stop shooting.
It fundamentally changes how you have to consume the news. Like when you see a breaking headline about peace talks or ceasefire negotiations, the natural human instinct is to feel a sense of relief.
Sure, you think the fighting is finally going to stop.
Right. But the mechanics we are seeing here show that often the fiercest, most desperate, and most destructive fighting happens right at the very edge of the negotiation table. The impending peace is the exact catalyst causing the immediate violence.
Which is a crucial takeaway for anyone trying to navigate modern geopolitical reporting. The transition from a hot war to a signed treaty is rarely a gentle ramp down. It is almost always a chaotic, violently contested cliff edge.
Well, let's pull all of this together. We started with the ticking stopwatch, and over the course of this deep dive, we've unpacked a truly volatile 26-day conflict.
Very volatile.
We've seen a 48-hour window of extreme escalation driven entirely by the rumor of a U.S.-brokered ceasefire. We've looked at the staggering logistical scale of the violence. 15,000 bombs dropped by Israel, 350 ballistic missiles fired by Iran, and thousands of lives lost.
Just massive numbers all around.
Yeah. We've analyzed a diplomatic deadlock where the U.S. threatens to unleash hell while Iran issues unrealistic counter-demands just to run down the clock before Friday's meetings in Pakistan.
Stalling for time.
And we've examined the intense pressure of a military apparatus racing to permanently dismantle an enemy's nuclear and ballistic infrastructure before an international peace treaty forces them to power down the jets. It is a portrait of a world operating on a razor's edge.
It really is. And as we process all of this information, looking at how the mere announcement of a resolution accelerates the destruction, this raises an important question.
Okay, what is it?
One that challenges the very nature of how global powers handle conflict resolution moving forward.
Like, if announcing a peace treaty triggers a frantic 48-hour blitz of unprecedented destruction, will future geopolitical mediators just stop announcing peace talks altogether?
That is the terrifying logical conclusion. Are we entering an era where diplomacy has to be conducted in total absolute secrecy?
Wow. Because if the warring sides know a treaty is coming,
They will empty their arsenals and level every remaining target before the ink dries. The transparency of the peace process might literally be costing lives.
are we destined for a future where the public and even the generals only find out about a peace treaty the second it goes into effect, just to prevent that final desperate smash and grab?
It's a dark thought.
That is a heavy, complex thought to leave on, but an essential one for understanding the brutal realities of modern warfare and diplomacy. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the headlines, look for the hidden clocks ticking behind the scenes, and we will catch you next time.